And we're recording. Coach K, how we doing?
Doing great, Tim.
Thanks for joining me. Obviously, unprecedented times. Trying to stay busy as a coach. Are you able to stay busy?
Yeah, we're doing everything we can, dealing with all the different things going on around the world right now.
Yeah, I know that's a silly question for you because you're always finding a way to stay busy one way or the other. But glad you could join us. I know you well from my 3 years working for you at WashU in St. Louis. I think you have quite a unique story and obviously a great coaching career that spans 5 decades now. Why don't you just tell people that don't know your background, like sort of when and where you got started coaching?
Sure, Tim. I went to Kalamazoo College coming out of high school in Pennsylvania and never really thought about coaching. I loved playing sports, but it was just part of my life, and pretty much was set on going to law school, as you did, and applied to law school. I was accepted at 2 different law schools, waitlisted at one, and that was enough to shake my confidence a little bit to make me think about, do I want to do something else? Decided to take a year off. And during that year off, I picked up a master's degree, but I asked my college coach, Ed Baker, if I could help out at Kalamazoo, just pick up towels or whatever. And I did that and still wasn't necessarily interested in coaching, but I decided I was going to take another year off and defer law school and went down to Ohio State to get a PhD, and basically walked into Woody Hayes' office, asked him the same question, if there was a way that I could help out with towels and whatnot. And that led to a conversation that led to my coming in as a graduate assistant and coaching wide receivers. That's how I got into coaching.
Wow. Is there like an aha moment for you? Like, you just talked about how you kind of maybe backdoored your way into this career, but was there a moment in time where you were like, you know what, this is exactly what I want to do for the rest of my life?
No, not even when I was told I was going to be the wide receiver coach. I went there for a reason, to get a PhD. And during that journey, getting my PhD, I, really embraced coaching a little bit more. It's pretty neat, on a Saturday to have 100,000 people yelling and screaming and working with just incredible athletes and seeing Ohio State at the top of the top 10 board, number 1 in the country, and we're playing Oklahoma. And, even then I wasn't sure I wanted to be a coach, but I certainly was enamored with like all the things that were around it. But that aha moment, I think, came maybe not so aha as over the course of time, realizing I really liked to be around young men, and they had a lot more in their mind than just playing football, even at Ohio State. And I enjoyed their stories, and I think one thing kind of led to another, but it was probably a little bit more fluid from the standpoint that I just embraced it more day to day and decided I wanted to coach, but not necessarily at a big college. I like to go someplace where I had been at a Kalamazoo College, where I could get to know the athletes, know the faculty, somehow become part of the teaching part of the university or college while I was coaching football. So not really aha, but more along the lines of it just kind of grew on me.
Gotcha. It's funny, you talk about small colleges. You know this, I know this, having worked at the Division III level. When you're a coach at this level, you got to wear multiple hats. And this sort of segues us into the topic I want to talk to you about is leadership. But my favorite story to tell about you, which you may or may not even remember, but it's week 1, my first season with WashU, and we're playing Ohio Northern, and there's construction on the athletic complex, and we break for breakfast, and I'm walking over to the athletic complex. It's probably it's St. Louis humidity in August. It's probably already 90 degrees out. And, it's 2 hours before the game. And I walk into our makeshift locker room, which is on the field in a what would you call it, a garage, I guess, of some sorts at that time. And I'm sweating profusely. And, I look at you and you are in there 2 hours before the game, closing in on 200 wins. And you're setting up the locker room and you're doing it by yourself. You're getting the chairs unfolded, the ice, the Gatorade is iced down. And to me, that was my first maybe lesson on you, but also my first real lesson in what it meant to serve as a leader. And why don't you just talk about, what you've learned about leadership over your 5 decade in coaching and how you are sort of looking at it today.
Wow. Okay. That's a lot, but I think the story that you told, I think, when we get into coaching, we all feel like we want to be a part of not only the lives of the people, but the things that are going to help shape those people along the way. And part of that is putting them in an atmosphere that you feel is either the best teaching or the best productive or certainly the most working atmosphere. So if that means putting up chairs, knowing that at halftime of that game that those kids are going to be able to concentrate on the message that they need to have, why wouldn't not only me but anybody in that situation says, I want us to be successful. I was really fortunate. I mentioned Woody Hayes, but really from the time that I really started playing football, I've had these influential people on me, and from each of them, I feel like I pulled something away. And I think most people would tell you that they are a product of all the different people that they've been around. But, my high school coach came in, Jack Cassabaum, and we had been 0-10 and 1-9 in the 2 previous years. And we lost a football game early in his tenure, 81-0. If you can believe that. So my 3rd game, my senior year, we're losing 81-0. I get put in at the end of the football game because I wasn't a starter, and I got an interception. Now, there's a lot of stories of that, right? You get an interception, 81-0 game. What are they throwing the football for? But for me, to get that interception, it was, I didn't know how to, understand that. We're losing 81-0. You feel pretty badly. I get put into the game. I get an interception. But it's like, wow, shouldn't be that big a deal. But he made a big deal of it, made a huge deal about it. And he said, as long as you're playing till the end of the game, even if you only get to play one play, that had a great impact on me. Just a tremendous impact, because it let me know that I was valuable to that team, that I had a role. Next thing I know, I was starting, and I had a few more of those interceptions, and he didn't treat me any differently than he did coming off the bench, telling me that I'm valuable to that team. And when I look back at it, that probably laid a great foundation for why I'm even in the game at all. I'm part of something bigger, and I have a role. And it's funny, I've been a head coach for 37 years, but it's a role. It's no more important or less important than that guy who's sitting on the end of the bench hoping he can get in the game when it's 81-0 to make a play. And our team that year came back. We finished 4-5-1, and it was the beginning of a long streak of just great seasons for Lancaster McCaskey High School, which also was kind of neat to know that even after I had gone, that people were building on. I mean, how can you build on a team that loses 81-0? But people did that. And we actually had 2 guys from my football team who went on and played professional football. So there's just so many different cool things that came out of that. But coming out of that to college, where Ed Baker was always listened as a head coach, and it seemed like he didn't talk very much. All he did was listen. And that was a whole different coaching dynamic than I've ever had before. And boy, does that make you feel special when you go into his office and all of a sudden you find out you're talking like I am now, right? That hasn't always been one of my best skills, but that made me feel special as well. And then to go to be with Woody Hayes, and Woody was, much different coach in terms of personality, but Woody had gone to a small college, Denison University, and he understood a small college. And there was times that I think he ran Ohio State like a small college. People on the outside, you really don't have any business to deal with my kids. People from the media, these are football players, and that was a kind of a Denison thought. Let us do our thing, and you go ahead and report on the game, but don't get into our structure. And so Woody was big on that. But what I certainly learned from Woody was so much beyond that. And I think the biggest thing is that the measure of a man isn't the fact that you get knocked down. The measure of man is when you get back up and go again. And who would have thought at Ohio State, of all the things to pull out, that have been the one, right? We're number one in the country, and we were knocking a lot of people down back in those days. But Woody saw so much beyond that. He saw the individuals and the struggles that they're going through. The struggle that we're going through right now with a virus that is impacting a country right now, so much more important than football. But it's through some of those things, like it isn't so much that we have that. What are you going to do now? And the measure of the man is being able to get up off the ground and go again. And that's pretty much what I think we as coaches are telling our athletes right now. It's so special to know that was the message of all the other things about competitiveness and things that I certainly learned at Ohio State. And then to go with Jim Dennison, who probably gave me my philosophical background for the way I've been a head coach, and that's win with a positive mental attitude. It was very similar to what Woody talked about, getting back up and going again. But Jim's whole thought was that, when events happen, there's two ways you can go about it. You can let that event itself control you, or you can take control of it by saying, my attitude about this is positive, and I want the guy who has a positive attitude. And it makes everything turn into a learning situation. It makes everything not necessarily go the way you want it to, but the fact that that's not going to be enough to pull you down and take you away from either where you want to go or what you want to do or who you want to be with. But I truly believe that win with PMA, which most guys would say is the thing that I tried to get across to them the most. Win, because winning's important. It's important to be successful. But positive mental attitude, it's not a gimmick, but it's a tool. It's a way to approach every situation, good or bad, to be able to come out and get it done. So I've had some people that have all placed some of these things in front of me, and you mentioned the servant leadership, which I probably learned as much through other people in my life, and certainly through the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. When I said, I don't want to be just a leader, I want to be a leader that is special, and that doesn't necessarily hit everybody the same way, but that hit me in a very, very special way when Grant Taff, a guy that I did not even know, but stood in front of an audience and talked about, being a servant to others. And that's the best way to lead. And I thought, my gosh, how great is that? Because that fit all the other things that these other people had taught me one way or another. They're going to listen to me if they know that I'm willing to go out there and set up chairs, right, before a football game, when I could be doing a lot of different things. But that would maybe have an impact on those players in such a way that would say, I want to be part of that. I want to be like that guy, like I wanted to be like Grant Taff. So that's kind of my background in coaching. And I have guys like you. I believe John Maxwell always said the best leaders are the ones that come from within. And to have guys like Tim Shields and the coaches that I've had over the years that were teaching me, as I'm the head coach, were teaching me ways to connect with people, the ways to think about things differently, the ways to be able to help me lead our players better, have been probably some of the most, or at least the more dynamic ones that I've had, because they're real, they're relevant. And I think that that's important to be able to coach athletes nowadays, men and women, both, that we're relevant and that we know what's going on. That's what I have always been able to get from my assistants as well.
Good. Let's talk about PMA. I know PMA is a big part of the WashU culture. The one question I always talk to other Division III coaches. Obviously, right now we're in uncharted territory, but this time in general, Division III, we're hands off during the spring for the most part. How do you maintain that culture and build on that culture in the spring months? When you're sort of relegated to keep your distance from your players.
Well, in this particular situation, social distancing has become kind of a buzzwords, right? And I think we all get it. We all understand what that means. I have, quite honestly, been afraid of social distancing over the years, because I think the cell phones and the computers, the technological age has created social distancing where people could connect when they're not right there next to each other. And you don't have to hear a voice or see the eyes or even listen as much as the message that was put out in the written word, which is also important, but very different. So I don't necessarily know how you do it. I think that what we did as we found out that we were going to be set in our own homes and at our school, that's across the country, right? That's California, it's Ohio, Florida, Minnesota, New York. How do you keep a team going? And my job isn't to keep a team going now because I'm an assistant coach, but I have 8 or 9 guys that I want that I coach at my position. I want them to be able to keep the connection going, because I think that's important for all of us, not just for our young kids. So just last week, I put one of our seniors to be in charge of coming up with a quote, and told him no more than 15 words in this quote, that is something that can just allow you for a moment of time engage with your teammates through the written word. And that's basically all I said. So on Monday, the first guy's going to go, and then Tuesday, the next guy's going to go, and we're all linked together with an email, right? And the first one was not only the less than 15 word quote when he quoted Kobe Bryant, but it was a quote that dealt with negativity and how Kobe Bryant had talked about negativity, and you have to put all those things, the challenges and some of those things aside. That's okay. So isn't that what we're going through? So he takes this great quote, and then he writes this whole thing about what it means to him. I didn't ask him to do that, but you better believe when your peers write a note to you, you're going to read it. Right? And I know what happened is all of our other guys in that group read that, and the next day, the next guy wrote his note. He's from Virginia, and his note was equally as outstanding, and he also talked about what that meant to him, and not just in these times, but he kind of took us through the brief history of playing a challenging schedule and going into a new conference, and the national championship comes out of our conference, and now we're dealing with a virus, and so he's putting all these things up there like obstacles and saying, no, these are all ways to get better. And you know what they're really saying is, this is how you live positive mental attitude. Not one guy said women with a positive mental attitude, not one of them. What they have talked about, though, are through these different quotes of exactly what it means to live with a positive mental attitude. So that's the culture. We want to build a culture, and these kids are living that culture and building it within each other through just peer, not through Larry Kindbom, not through the voice coming down from above saying, okay, this is good stuff, through each other. So that's one of several ways, but I think you have to live it. It's one thing to say it. There's there's a lot of people in this world that say that, and then things come along and all of a sudden you don't want to be around those people because they're the most negative people, right? That's not living a positive mental attitude. So it isn't a gimmick. It isn't just something you say and magically everything goes well. What it is it's a reminder, it's an affirmation that if we can just keep something like this in our life, something bad is happening, we can't have spring practice. Well, that doesn't mean that we have to shut down our relationships as people. And let's face it, that's 90% of the fun of football is the guys you're with. So let's build on that, because that's what we can build on right now. We have more time to do that.
Sure. And I know the message hasn't changed for you, in your years as a coach at PMA. I know that from a project I worked on, reaching out to your former players. It seems like everyone's talking about PMA, and that's stretching for decades, right? Do you feel like, maybe the message hasn't changed, but the delivery of the message has changed because of the student athlete today versus maybe the student athlete 20 or 30 years ago? Or do you think it's the delivery is the same regardless?
Well, I think the delivery is the same. I obviously there's different issues that come along, but the message really is still the same. It's all about attitude, right? It isn't what happens. It's how you look at what happens and what you're going to do with that and where you're going to take that. I think for coaches to be relevant, which I think is really important. Being relevant doesn't mean that staying up with just the events that are going on during the day, but relevant to me means that I'm presenting a consistent message. I love you. That's a consistent message. It isn't like I love you today, I hate you tomorrow, whatever. All right. So when you say win with a positive mental attitude, that's a message. And I think for someone to say, well, it doesn't matter. I mean, World War II, things happened during World War II. Some of the positive mental attitude would have approached some very devastating moments in their lives saying, you know what, how can we make this a better world coming out of something like this is no different than the coronavirus, 40 or 50 years later, saying the same thing. We have some tough things going on. How can we make ourselves better? So, I like our group project because for those guys to come out and come up with quotes and then to maybe spill a little bit out, they probably wouldn't be doing that if we were in spring practices right now or they were going to classes every day. So they're going to grow through this. They absolutely will grow. I think our country will grow through this whole thing. And to me, that keeps us relevant. And so the message is the same. That's what you asked me, Tim. Is it the same? Yeah, the message stays the same. I don't think I have to deliver it any differently, but I think I have to know what's going on now to be able to relate it to their world.
Sure. As we close here, I always seek your advice. What advice do you have for up and coming coaches, guys that are trying to, emulate your career? I know that's a broad question for you, and maybe you could narrow down a couple things that you felt have been successful for you over, your time in coaching.
Well, I think I only know the things that hold dear to me. I think, and I would believe this if I were in any organization, but organization is built on trust, and much of that trust can only be measured, I think, by our ability to listen. It's so hard because everybody wants to get their point across that conversations turn out to be what we're doing right now. This is a conversation, but not really. You're asking me a question, I'm answering it, but I'm answering and answering and answering. And had I not been in this situation, my gut instinct is, what do you think, Tim? Because I want to know, I want to learn from you. And I think as we go in there as coaches, that we probably learn more from our athletes than we will ever be able to give them. Let's face it, when I'm a head coach and I have 110 guys in the team, I have 110 different people just in that alone, not counting even staff and support staff, that can make me better. I better be speaking not just once for every two things that I hear, once for every 100 and whatever that number is. So that develops trust. And it's still about trust. It's being able to walk into the office every day. It's being able to go out on the field every day, being able to get with a group of people and say, it's never going to be an issue of trust. We trust everybody. So because we can do that, people can have different opinions. People can have different ways of looking at things. But trust is also, when it's all said and done, and we have to do it this way, I trust that everybody's going to put everything that they have into it. So when, I'm trying to answer your question about what would I say to young coaches, I say, well, build everything off that. So trust also means putting yourself in a position that other people trust you. And that the only way that I think trust is delivered is you truly love the people that you coach. And that it's still a game of people. I love X's and O's like everybody else. I'm getting to the age where I forget the X's and O's though, but I don't forget the people. And so if you make it about people, it's amazing how much more fun it is to take those X's and O's and be able to try things, because guess what? Some of those things aren't going to work. But people will trust you because they know that you know them and they know you, and that's what your job is to do that. The other thing is, make sure that, you're staying up with what's going on with the world. I can tell you that 30 years ago, Tim, when I took the job here at Washington University, it was right at a time when computers were really coming to hit the forefront. The PCs were coming out. Seems so long ago, and you laugh now, but there were guys that looked at the computers and said, football's not a game about computers, it's a game about people. And they were right. And we're talking about good friends and guys right at that creative age where they go. But there were a lot of guys that ruled themselves out because they didn't understand that the computer wasn't the big thing. The big thing was still about people, but computer was a way to communicate with people, or to be able to have more time so you can communicate with people. And we had a lot of good guys that I think got lost in the profession because they were afraid of the technology, or they didn't understand how you could use that to either develop or work with people. Now, we laugh at that now with computers, but I know with the cell phones, it's the same thing. They can be total destruction. I hear people say, oh, we shouldn't have cell phones. It's like, well, we have them, all right, PMA. So we have them. What are we going to do with them? Can we make it possible? Is it possible to turn that into a positive thing? And it doesn't mean that they have to take their cell phones on the field and text their buddies when they're out there. What it does mean is that we know they have them. How can we use our messages to help promote, to help their lives become better because of that? So the technology thing can be scary. And although those things for young coaches right now, they look at that and say, really, you're talking about that? But they're going to have something in their lifetime that's going to be different. And it could be even simple things like the rules in football, the new XFL with some of the rules that they have. And some of them are out there somewhere. And you know what, they might be part of the game because they're kind of fun when you look at that. And it isn't the rule, but it's the fact that you play by the rules, right? That's the thing that has to withstand time. So if the rules are changed, how am I going to be able to teach that? How am I going to be able to make that go? I don't want to be the, well, that's it, football's done. I can't believe that, they're letting pass interference go all the time. And it's like, well, that's not pass interference, still pass interference. But the rules, know the rules, teach by the rules. The rules change, teach by the rules the way they change. And I think that's a good lesson for life for all of us. We're not always going to be in coaching the rest of our lives, right? The rules change on the outside, the way that we do our business in the business world, or the political world, or anything else. So you got to adapt to that, but understand that that's not necessarily bad. Positive mental attitude. How can I make that positive, make that go in my life and my leadership?
Awesome. I appreciate your time, and thanks for sitting down with me, and hopefully we'll get these videos out, and some guys can really get some stuff out of this.
Well, Tim, if I can say this, you're a young coach, and obviously you're you're good at what you do, and every day I know you try to advance yourself professionally. I think that's huge. But I do believe that we need more young guys in the leadership, especially in college football. I would love to see those guys step forward and become part of the discussions on what happens day to day, and not necessarily always be the people that have to hear. These are the things that we decided on as old people, right? We just need new young people in the administrative part to really keep our game advancing forward and make it fun for the people we coach. But thank you for what you do.
Thank you, Coach. Appreciate it.
All right, we'll see you then, Tim.
Yep.